Supervisors that there hasn't been a female member of the Santa Cruz Board of Supervisors since 2014. That could change with this election. There also hasn't been a person of color on the board since 2010. And that will change because all three of these candidates are people of color, which is something really important and great and something that we can celebrate. There also has never been a black person on the Board of Supervisors. So that too could change. So just to put that out there, that this is a moment that's really wonderful and different and new and something changing in our community, in a place where everyone says nothing ever changes, this is changing. So there is something there to be said. Okay, so now we're going to start with 1-minute statements from each of the candidates. And I think we'll just go right in a row. So Justin, Amy, Shebra.
Great, well, good evening everyone who's here and who's here virtually. My name is Justin Cummings. I currently serve on the Santa Cruz City Council as a council member. I served as Vice Mayor of the City of Santa Cruz, and I served as Mayor of the City of Santa Cruz during 2020, which was one of the most challenging years in the recent history of our community, as we dealt with the onset of COVID-19, social unrest after the murder of George Floyd, and the CZU fires. This is my 4th and final year on the City Council, and as I end my commitment to being on the City Council, I've decided to run for the 3rd District County Board of Supervisors. As a little bit of my background, I'm an environmental scientist with a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology, and I've worked on topics such as climate change, forest restoration, and invasive species management. Since 2015, I've been working on I've created 2 nonprofit workforce development programs here in Santa Cruz that have focused on increasing diversity in the field of environmental conservation and increasing diversity in the field of tech around the use and application of drones. I've secured $2.6 million for the Diversity Conservation Scholarship Program to do that work, and recently was able to secure $1 million planning grant to help the Citrus Initiative for Drone Education Research. Sorry, and then I didn't realize the time person didn't hear, so.
Sorry, I didn't watch that either, sorry, my fault.
So just go ahead and start.
Yeah, please start.
Hi, my name is Amy Chen Mills. I'm a nonprofit director and mental health educator, a mother of 2. I've lived here for 30 years. In December, I did not think I would be up here talking to you. And the reason that I am here is because of something that Joseph said, which is that climate crisis is upon us. It is something that is so huge, I feel that most of us have a hard time getting our minds around it. I am someone who has gotten my mind around it and been through so many emotions and have deeply studied the science. And I feel like we need to start to look up as leaders and address the mental health issues that are starting to happen with climate for our young people, including anxiety, depression, even suicide. As a nonprofit director, this is gonna be hard. I secured funding to run the National Community Resiliency Project across the nation, and ran projects and oversaw projects and oversaw the outcomes from those projects, and I am done. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Everyone here has an inner passion and purpose that drive their journey. Mine has brought me here to this moment. It started in northern Iran and included living through the Islamic Revolution, immigrating to a new country. The journey set me on my path of working towards my passion, building healthy, thriving communities, and doing it by embodying the values I gained from my parents, courage and compassion. I've committed to this for the last 2 decades here in Santa Cruz County, partnering with county departments, nonprofits, private sector in every jurisdiction across our county to address the most complex issues. But the work remains. This includes a focus on critical issues such as homelessness, behavioral health, housing, wildfire preparedness, climate action, economic recovery, and youth well-being. To do this successfully, we need to shift from our siloed way of doing things and working together. This is what I have experience with, this is what I'm passionate about, and I'm ready to take it to scale.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, so that's our beginning, and now we're going to move on to the questions. The first question is about climate change, which is of course a global issue, but here in Santa Cruz, it's also a practical issue. It brings disasters every few years, particularly to coastal homeowners and those people who live in fire-prone areas, mostly rural fire-prone areas. The county is also striving for equity in its operational plan, which means allocating funds in a way that helps the most people. So the question is, will you let people continue to build in areas near the coasts, which are flood or fire prone, in these remote locations, given that the county has to pay for the repairs in those places when they flood or when there are fires? Is it equitable to put resources into protecting coastal homes and rural remote areas when there are other districts that might need those funds deeply? And those funds, I will remind you, that could be used for affordable housing or healthcare or these kinds of issues. I think, Justin, you started, so we'll start with Amy.
So in terms of places that are most impacted by climate, we have the Wooey area in Bonnie Doon. I think if we tried to move people out, having been up there quite a bit lately, there would be an armed rebellion. So I'm not interested in forcing people out of there. If people want to rebuild, I'm happy to help them rebuild. I see that as my job as District 3 supervisor, is to help them as much as possible get their homes back up and protect that area from future intense wildfires. That's a huge issue for us. We are short of firefighters statewide. We are short of firefighters within the county. We are short of the inmates to fight fires. Places like Last Chance, I think people are sort of taking their own risks there. I don't know, how much the county is doing for them at this time, but I do feel like when people have lived there for a long time, their hearts are there. And so I would want to protect and help them, but also not encourage anyone to keep building out there because we are in such a serious situation. In terms of flood-prone areas and coastal erosion, same thing. I don't think people are going to just get up and move, but in terms of building more housing or more buildings or et cetera in those areas, I don't think it's a good idea. We have climate change, like I said, upon us, and it's just going to get worse as far as I can tell because we aren't really turning this ship around. And we need to turn this ship around, and I'm going to advocate for that at the supervisor level.
That's your time. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't advocating having people move out or kick them out, but the question is, are we going to continue to be building there? But yes, you answered that. Okay. Rebuilding. Right, rebuilding. Okay, Shebra.
Great. Well, climate change, as we all know, is our largest existential threat and something that we need to face immediately. I think we need to rethink the intersectionality of how we grow as a community and what our response to climate change is. So absolutely allowing folks to rebuild in the fire-affected zones. There is a local coastal plan that's the city and the county are engaging in right now, so there's an opportunity for us to look at that and see how we could mitigate the impacts. But thinking about land use and thinking about how we grow and where we grow, putting housing around urban corridors, around transit corridors, that will help us address some of the climate change impacts that we're seeing right now. So we have to think bigger, we have to connect the dots and think beyond coastal housing, but we can't just say you can't build here. We have to say where you can build and how we can build and how we can grow. And there are a lot of different opportunities that we have with the housing elements, with the local coastal plan, that we can think differently and do things differently.
Well, I'll just start by saying I dedicated the past 20 years of my life working on environmental causes and studying environmental issues. And so this is something that I'm greatly familiar with. When it comes to what the impacts that we saw from the CZU fires, I think one of the things that we could recognize there is that at the state level, we did not have enough firefighting resources. And what ended up happening was that many people who could have stayed and defended their homes, when they were told to leave, many of those homes were lost. I know individuals who live in the parts of the county who want to fight fires in particular in the 3rd District in Bonnie Doon. There are people who want to join the volunteer firefighting force, but they're not able to because of the requirements by CAL FIRE to have 300 hours of training, where you have in Ben Lomond people who can just walk onto the volunteer firefighting force without any experience. And so I think what we need to do is figure out how we can allow people to help us fight the impacts of climate change, because it's going to get more expensive and we're not going to be able to pay for more and more firefighters. Yes, we will be able to afford some, but if we can actually get people from the communities who actually live where they're going to be impacted to help us fight fires, that will be helpful. And as it relates to building, I think we need to start thinking about where is the most appropriate place to build and how are we going to do managed retreat as well. Our climate action plan has shown that there are a number of areas within the city of Santa Cruz, as it is, for example, on the beach flats where I used to live, that is prone to flooding. And we need to be thinking about how are we going to move those people out when we know that they're going to be impacted by climate change. So it's not just about building housing for the future and where that's going to go. It's about how are we going to move people now.
Okay, if our trends continue as they are now, a lot of people are going to continue to work from home. So what that means is that a lot of Silicon Valley workers are going to continue to come and buy homes in Santa Cruz. That means home prices will continue to increase. Do you have any proposals or ideas how to combat this and how to help local people afford a house? Shepra.
Great. Yes, we have found ourselves in a tremendous crisis here in Santa Cruz. We have policies that are decades old that have prevented us from growing in a sustainable, smart way, and this is what the outcome is. It's the housing crisis that we have. I'm proud to say that this is something I focused on the city council. I have 100% yes vote rate on housing. That equals to 484 units here in our community. So I think one of the solutions is we need to grow smartly. We need to build, as I said earlier, around urban corridors and transit corridors so we can have walkable communities. That also links to climate change. We need to think of a new model that encourages housing, safety, and environmental sustainability. We have an opportunity with the revise of our housing element at the county. And once we do that, we can revise our zoning ordinance that facilitates approval of housing projects, specifically administrative approval or fast tracking of 100% affordable housing units and expediting, I just realized I need to look at you, expediting building of ADUs. So those are some tactics that we can put here. We have the opportunity immediately to do that. And I also think it's important to have a transparent and inclusive engagement with our community, because housing is an issue that can be very divisive. So thank you.
I'm next. Great, so I think one of the things we really need to focus on is creating more workforce housing for the people who live and work in our communities. This could be housing for city workers, county workers, teachers, UCSC professors and students, but we really need to be focusing on that type of housing that we need for our community. I have pushed back on some of the housing proposals because one of the things that I've been advocating for is that we maximize the amount of affordable housing that goes into new development. Once a building is built, it will likely be there for the next 50 plus years. And so by maximizing the amount of affordable housing we can get in these units as they're being built will ensure that we'll have deed restricted affordable housing moving forward. One of the ways that we were able to do that on the city council is we increased our inclusionary housing percentage from 15 to 20% in new units and are encouraging the use of Section 8 housing vouchers, a program which pays market rate but also subsidizes the cost of housing for low-income people. And as a county supervisor, I will be looking to increase the inclusionary percentage from 15 to 20% at the county as well. These are the types of things that we need to start thinking about and innovative and new ways of approaching the housing crisis. Because if we just build market rate housing and just let any development come through, we're not going to actually meet the needs of our community that's here. And we're actually going to encourage more people to come from over the hill because they will be the ones who can afford those housing, that form of housing. In addition to that, earlier it was mentioned that there's a surplus at the state level, and I think we need to be knocking on the state's door to tell them, hey, if you're going to put these housing allocations on our community, you need to help us pay for it. Some of that money can come back into our community to help us provide the affordable housing we need, and that's something that I'll do as county supervisor.
Thank you. For those of you who may not know, I think probably everyone does know, we are in the middle of a housing emergency. I think that the county should declare a housing emergency and then act with all haste to try to house as many workforce level people and low income people and provide permanent supportive housing to people who are already here. That would be my priority in answer to this question. My understanding about the regional housing needs assessment is that the city of Santa Cruz is doing pretty well in terms of sort of mid-level, low income, but not very low income housing. And that intersects with the homelessness crisis that we're facing right now. A lot of people think, oh, everyone's coming from out of town. That is not what our point in time counts are showing. People do come from out of town, that's a reality, but the reality also is that we are living in one of the most expensive communities in the nation. We always rank from 1 to 3 in terms of most expensive communities in the nation to live in terms of income, median income, to the cost of housing. That is insane. And I think that that contributes to the fact that we have one of the highest per capita homelessness rates in the state. So we need to factor all of these things in, and we need to educate the public about this so that we have buy-in to permanent supportive housing, very low income housing, and that would be my focus, actually, because these are the people, to me, who really are the most vulnerable and really don't have the options. Thank you.
And for the next question, I'd like you to, oh, yeah, did you have something? Sure.
I just want to point out that recently with the city of Santa Cruz, our Pacific Station North and South have been funded through market rate housing. So it's important to have a range of housing. And if we don't have middle income housing, you're telling our teachers and our firefighters and our social workers that they can't stay here. A parent who makes $60,000, each parent, let's say, makes $60,000, so a family for $120,000, they can't afford to live here with just low income housing. A range of housing is necessary and needed.
Justin, did you want to respond to that?
Sure.
Say anything, or Amy, you'll have time to.
I'll just say that I'm the only renter who's up here. And I, as I mentioned, have a PhD. I run multi-million dollar nonprofits. I can't afford to live in market rate housing. Market rate studio, 555 Pacific, 400 square foot is $2,800 a month. You must make 6 figures, and when people say affordable by design, they try to say that smaller units are going to be cheaper. That's not what we're seeing in these market rate developments. We're seeing very expensive housing that is not going to meet the needs of our teachers, of our firefighters, of our police officers, and of our workforce. And so that's why I said workforce housing, because yes, we do need very low and low, but we also need workforce housing. And the last thing I'll say to this too is that there's not a single family unit in this town, single family home in this town that's affordable. All of those are now market rated. Those are all $1 million homes, regardless of how small it is. We're not seeing the price come down on many single family homes, which means that we have to build, and I'll point out that those homes, what I've heard from people when I'm walking, were bought by people who were teachers, and they were librarians, and they were police officers, and they were plumbers. None of those people who work in those jobs can afford that housing anymore, which is why we have to focus on building more workforce housing, building more low and very low, and having a gamut of housing for our community.
Good. Thank you. Amy?
Oh, I just sort of wanted to reiterate that. I mean, there's a difference between...
If you want to say, if you have something to add...
I do have something to add, which is that we as a community, we have to look at this question because there's a debate about market rate housing. We just had a YIMBY forum where there's all this debate about is market rate housing the answer? How much of it do we need? Given that we are facing possible collapse regarding climate, which is what the military is predicting in 20 years from now, how much cement do we need to be using? How much resource do we want to be using when we are one of the most developed nations in the world and our actions impact the global south, people in Africa who are already starving and in drought and in conflict. So I think we have to be very careful about what kinds of housing we build. I know we're in a housing emergency. These emergencies are intersecting now, and they're butting up against each other. So we have to have dialogues. I don't like to take a fixed position because I know when I get on the board, I'm going to be, talking to lots of different people. I'm always willing to talk to people.
Okay.
But my priority is low-income housing. Sorry.
Perfect. No, sorry. We need to keep going. So thank you so much. No, you did get time. I did give you. Oh no, I wasn't timing that. This was a little bit extra, so I just added that on improvisationally. I do think this is a good moment to ask each of you to take your time, to take your 90 seconds to differentiate yourself from the other two candidates, your opponents. What makes you special or unique? And please cite an example of ways you have voted differently or a policy you support that they oppose. I've lost track of who's starting. Is it Justin or is it Amy? I don't know. I've completely lost track. Justin, thank you. Justin?
Well, I'll start by saying, so that was a multifaceted question.
Right, so differentiate yourself from the others and cite a policy that you support that they oppose.
Okay. Well, I'm the only candidate that served 4 years on the Santa Cruz City Council. I'm the only candidate that has served as vice mayor, and I'm the only candidate that served as mayor during a time of tremendous crisis. The last time we had a board of supervisors who served during a time of crisis was Marty Wormhout, who had served on the Santa Cruz City Council and was mayor during the earthquake. And I believe that as we're moving forward with still navigating these crises, we need people who have had experience navigating those to be on the board of supervisors. I worked with I'm the only environmental scientist as well who will be on the board of supervisors. I'm the only person who served on 22 committees and commissions, including public safety, the League of California Cities Public Safety Policy Commission, and I'm the only supervisor who's worked, I'm the only candidate who's worked not only with all the city council members who've come over the past 4 years, but also I've worked with numerous county supervisors and supervisors in other districts on these various boards to get some policies passed. One of the things I'll point out, and you said—
the policy that you support that they oppose, or that you oppose that they support, whichever way you'd like to go.
This is going to be a challenge because I think that there are some that maybe Amy would support that Trevor might oppose.
It doesn't have to be both of them combined.
Okay.
One of them.
Well, one of the policies that I supported was increasing the amount of Section 8 in new developments. As we saw 2 projects come on River Street, I moved that we work with the developers to increase the amount of Section 8 housing that was in those 2 developments, and that was voted down. And that's time.
Yeah, you can. Well, okay. You didn't really say what you support that they oppose.
So that's something that I supported and that Trevor opposed.
Okay. You can't think of anything, then we'll move on. Okay, Amy. You're next. Amy's up.
One of the things I think makes me unique is how much of a history I have in mental health and resiliency, and particularly around climate. And it's something that I want to make sure that our young people have exposure to, and also our mental health services have exposure to. In terms of climate, I would say that a difference between Justin and I— Justin says he's a climate scientist quite a bit. I've been a climate activist for some time, and I haven't seen a lot of leadership on the council or even on the board in terms of, look, this is what we're dealing with, and this is now what we have to do. And that's what our young people need to see and hear from us now. And we need to have new innovative programs like regenerative agriculture, microgrids, even food sustainability backup plans at this time so that we can feel safe. That's one of the reasons I'm running. I want to feel safe in this county around, what a lot of people don't want to look at. In terms of SHEBRA, in terms of policies, we have, I think, a lot of differences in terms of homelessness. I would not support criminalizing homelessness before providing services. I want to get those services set up according to the county grand jury report. The county grand jury report has all the recommendations that we need to really start with. Some of them are already in action, and I would be supporting the things that came out of the county grand jury report that I think we need to do to really stand up services in this county and throughout the county for people who are currently unhoused.
And you didn't mention Justin's policies, but you didn't mention yours, so you guys are—
Justin, well, climate. I have met with Justin and others on the council, and when I've talked about climate and how concerning it is for me, I did not get the responses that I wanted to hear as a mother and as someone who knows the science.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that good enough?
Justin, I can give you a chance to respond, but it's Shebra's turn first, and then you can respond.
I have extensive public health background, over 2 decades of the background here in Santa Cruz County. I've worked with the Board of Supervisors to address some of our biggest issues: homelessness, health healthcare, criminal justice system. I've worked with every jurisdiction in our county. I've worked with our county departments through my grant writing work and developed policies. I have extensive experience in relationships with nonprofits, and I have deep connections from North County to South County. Neither of my opponents can match the depth and breadth of the work that I've done throughout this county. I understand the flow of federal and state money and know where it comes from and where to put it. I have the ability to coordinate across sectors. In just over a year, I've risen to a leadership position on the city council. I have brought forward homelessness ordinances. Not one homeless person has been criminalized through these ordinances, but what has happened is that we have stood up 165 beds, and we have had 38 people housed and 54 people on the pathway to housing. So this is where I differentiate, and my opponents were in support of keeping the Ross camp open, even when it was declared a public health crisis. I'll also say that my life experience as an immigrant, a mom, and a woman of color is a unique perspective that's missing on the County Board of Supervisors, and I have very strong endorsements. Supervisor Ryan Coonerty has said that I should be a successor, Neil Coonerty, Sheriff Hart, former Director of Mimi Hall.
Okay, Justin, I said you could have a minute, right, to respond? If anyone else? Yep. You don't have to.
No, really. No,
it's only if you want to.
I'll just say that, one of the things that, for one, I've been working on the Climate Action Task Force for the past 4 years. I've also served on the West Cliff Management Plans Technical Advisory Board. I've taken leadership roles to push for building electrification to reduce the dependency on natural gas. And so those are a number of the things that I've done as a city council member to help improve and work on solutions towards addressing climate change. In addition to that, I'll just also respond to one thing that Trevor said about the Ross camp. There were a number of different factors that were in play with the Ross camp closure, and I ended up being the final vote on that. And one of the things that was concerning to me was that we needed to have a place for these people to go. And the county worked to set up 1220 River Street, and when they were able to demonstrate that the people would have a secondary option that was clean and humane, that was when we voted for them to close the camp. In addition to that, there was a court-ordered cease and desist order that prevented the city from closing the camp down as well. And so the city council didn't have a choice to close it as quickly as it wanted to, because the courts had actually told us we couldn't. So just wanted to make sure that we can clear up any lies and misinformation that's out there about the Ross camp closure.
That's great. And I did want to move on to a question about, because the city and the council have been clamping down on street camping, and it's been over the past year. Do you approve of what the city and the county are doing, and what would you do differently? I can't remember I think Amy now, you're next. Thank you.
Well, I served on the city committee, advisory committee on homelessness for 9 months. And at that time, we also had the River Street camp happening. We had shelter at the Armory that was closing down. What I've been seeing is that these beds and shelters and places to camp, they haven't really changed too much. So when we talk about unmanaged encampments, what we're really talking about, to me, is homelessness. I mean, it's not like people want to be there. If they had homes, they would be in those homes. There may be some people who like to live out in the woods, or who, just are having problems living inside. And that's something that I know very well, working with people who have been unhoused, is that they have mental health issues, that they have drug and alcohol issues, and we are so behind in terms of having facilities for people to go to rehab, to have psychiatric beds. The main jail, which I just toured with Sheriff Hart, is a disaster. It is a disaster. It is a human rights catastrophe. There is no yard there is no rehab there is nothing going on. I mean, there may be some programs, there is some mental health support actually, but the facility itself is not something that this county should tolerate. And that's where a lot of people are going. So we really have to promote funding and setting up, and there's money coming from the state for these things, there's money coming from the beds for these
things. Specifically on street camping, would you agree with the county policies now or not?
The county or the city?
County and city policies on street camping.
You mean criminalizing them? Is that what you mean? Because is that
whatever you want to call it, but
yeah, I see what you're saying. No, I think we have to provide services where people are. At the time of Ross Camp, there was a council member who was saying, how about if we take everyone over to the Benchlands, and offering all these different options. Now where are they? They're at the Benchlands. We could have just provided services at the benchlands to begin with. So time.
Thank you. Deborah?
Look, the reality is when one of my opponents had a council majority, no action was taken. And we have taken action. We're doing the best that we can. This is a huge problem. We can't solve it alone. No city, no county, no jurisdiction can solve it alone. This is an approach. We move people off the streets into safe spaces, connected to services. That's one approach and that's one tactic. I have had decades of experience working on homelessness. I worked in the Tenderloin, boots on the ground. I've written grants and brought in millions of dollars. I have $1 million perpetuity for youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. I've led strategic planning processes with youth experiencing homelessness. Yes, this is a strategy that is part of the bigger picture.
Justin?
Great. Well, as a council member, I should say as vice mayor and mayor, I served on the homeless 2x2 committee for 2 years working with the county. And that was a very collaborative process, and one of the years that I was working on that was when we were experiencing COVID. And working with the county, the city was able to stand up more homeless services in the history of the entire city. We had, in the city of Santa Cruz, we had 3 hotels, with the VFW Hall, we had the Armory, and we also had encampment that was behind the benchlands that was being run by the county. And one of the good things that came out of that is that we were able to demonstrate how we could provide services that were compatible with the community. When I was mayor, we went to the Prospect Heights neighborhood, and we told them about what we were going to implement at the Armory. We listened to the community about their concerns. We implemented those concerns. We have never received a complaint about the Armory. And that is what we need to do. We need to stand up services, and we need to do so in a way where we're bringing the community into the conversation and not just trying to force different types of programs in different neighborhoods. We have plenty of models now to show how we can stand these up and how they can have minimal impacts on the community. And so we need to move forward with standing up these services. And as we're standing up services, we do need to be able to direct people into those services. One of the issues that I have with some of the proposals that were put to the city council is that, for example, the temporary outdoor living ordinance and the oversized vehicle ordinance, those weren't taken broadly to the community to get community input on those programs. They were brought to the council very quickly, and I'll stop there.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
2 clarifying points. There was an extensive community engagement process throughout the years, and we had over 3,000 communications about these ordinances in support of. And in 2020, we were mandated by the state to stand up services because of COVID.
How do you plan to involve Latinx residents in our district? Latinx, sorry. How do you plan to involve, is it Shepherd's turn? Sorry. Latinx residents in our district?
So on the city council, I've worked with our former mayor, Donna Myers, and our current mayor, Sonia Berner, to put forward an actionable racial equity resolution. And part of that includes engaging members of our community from the Latinx community, as well as other subpopulations here in Santa Cruz. So that's in the city of Santa Cruz. I would take that to the county level. I think we need to look at our pathways to leadership, including committees and commissions. I know that Santa Cruz County has done a Santa Cruz Like Me report that shows the demographics of our committees and commissions, but the next step needs to be taken. We need to go directly to the community. We need to engage and see what their concerns are, how they want to be, what their concerns are and how they want to be engaged, and then open up those opportunities for members of the Latinx community.
Justin?
Great. Something that was a little troubling to me that happened recently when we were voting on the district election maps was that the map that was selected for the 6 districts was, one, it wasn't the one that staff recommended that we had feedback on, but it was also a map that reduced and diluted the votes of Latinx people in what would be the 4th district. It cut off Lower Ocean from the Beach Flats, and it extended the Beach Flats district into the downtown and into the Upper West Side. And I voted against that because that reduces the voice of Latinx people and the potential for them to be in our local government. And that's why we'll be voting no on Measure E, because we need to make sure that if we're adopting maps and if we're being pushed towards districts, then we need to make sure that we will actually have increased representation of Latinx people on our city council and in our local government. In addition to that, I'm the only candidate that's fluent in Spanish. And when I was mayor of Santa Cruz, when we had to reach out to our immigrant communities and we had to reach out to the Latinx community, I was able to directly communicate with them. And they said how much they appreciated being able to speak to their representatives in their language. And so I bring that as a candidate for 3rd District County Supervisor. And I will continue to work with Felipe Hernandez, with the Rise Together group, and with other community members to ensure that we're gonna have Latinx representation on our city council or in our local government. Latinos make up over 30% of our population, and we need to make sure that we're going to those communities and we're reaching out to them and we're understanding their needs so that we're meeting their concerns as well. Thank you.
So there is actually a commission that was set up under John Leopold to bring inclusion to the county, to bring sort of like a DEI commission. And that commission became unhoused with the election of Manu Koenig. A friend of mine is on that commission, her name is Gloria Nieto, and so I would want to get their opinions about how we bring not just Latinx people up into the county system and giving feedback and advice and informing our policy decisions, but other people as well. Black people in our community. I'm a Chinese American. I would be the first Chinese American on the Board of Supervisors. We have a long history here.
I missed that one, okay.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of firsts. And so I think we really need to hear from people who are in the community about how to go about this, you know, and that's what that commission is for. And so if I became a member of the Board of Supervisors, I would be adopting that commission, if they still want to be adopted, they're now in the Department of Health, and asking them what they want. And Gloria said she supported me because I am someone who has done a lot of work in educating white people about how to interact with people of color. It's something that I've gotten a lot of education on in terms of other groups, and I think that that's something that we need to look at throughout the county system, is education in, what do you call, anti-racist, anti-racist material, anti-racist training. And I've done that for people globally through my work recently. Thank you.
There's been some egregious accusations by my opponent and some of his supporters about gerrymandering and undemocratic process. This really undermines the work that's happening across the country by people like Stacey Abrams working on Voting Rights Act. The graphs that came to us, the maps that came to us, were created by expert demographers. They went through an extensive community process, and they were voted on by the council.
Response?
Sure. Well, I will also point out that when the demographer brought back the maps at the meeting where we made the decision, they first said that there's a high concentration of Asians on campus as a district. There's a high concentration of Latinos in the Beach Flats area and in Lower Ocean, and they said that they took in the feedback that they heard from the community at the first meeting, and the maps that they brought back, the new maps that they proposed, reflected the community's desire to keep populations of color intact and that the maps would reflect the desire of the community. And those maps were voted against. And the map that was adopted, that was moved by Shevra, split Upper Campus in half, which diluted the student vote and diluted the Asian vote, and it split Lower Ocean away from the Beach Flats, included Lower Ocean with the Seabright area, and included the Beach Flats with downtown and parts of the Upper West Side. That's what happened. That is, if the goal was to make sure that there's Latino representation and representation by people of color, those districts should have remained intact, and we should have adopted the maps that the demographer brought back to us with the community's recommendations.
The demographers recommended all of the maps. Map 602, in fact, got the most response on the community survey that we did. And map 602 kept communities of interest together.
Okay, good. Okay, one more minute, one more last.
I'll just say, It did not keep Latinx communities together, and the whole reason why we're going through this district election process is because that there was an accusation of racially polarized voting that keeps Latinos off the city council. And if that's the case, we need to try to make sure, and when the demographer brought back map 604, which would have had a high concentration area of working class people and Latinx people, we should have gone with the maps that did that. They also said that Asian communities are a population of interest, and if we care about having the voice of Asian people on our city council, then that should have been kept as its own district as well.
Okay, well, in further differentiating you from one another, I want to ask you each just an individual question about in case your voting record or what you oppose and don't oppose. Shebra, I'm going to start with you. It's going to be about affordable housing. You voted for almost, I think, every affordable housing project that's been put before you. People worry that if too much housing is built too quickly, it will change the nature of Santa Cruz. With the exception of obvious reasons not to fund something, like if it's on a toxic waste site or if it's 25 stories high, what would be your limits in voting for some sort of an affordable housing? What would be your defining line of something that you would not vote for? Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Is there any situation in which you wouldn't vote for affordable housing?
Well, if it impacts, yes, if it impacts our environment, if it has,
right.
Yeah.
Explain your limits, though. Like, what are your limits?
Well, look, okay, we're not here on accident. We have continued to find excuses to say no to housing, and that is why we are being penalized by the state. We heard earlier from our assembly candidates that there are a number of bills, and we've lost local control because we've said no too many times. So I think, I will work with the community. We are working with the community to set objective standards to make sure that it fits within our community and not impact the quality of life in our community. And we need to say yes to housing. Otherwise, the problem will continue to grow. People will be pushed out. People will be living on the streets.
Thank you. Okay, Amy, yours is next. You don't have a voting record, so I can't go on what you voted. All I can do is
Thank
go
goodness.
on, right? But you have spoken out, obviously, on mental health issues and on homelessness and on environmentalism. You've spoken out against the downtown library in your campaign literature, but you also insist that we need to build more affordable housing, and that complex would be doing that. There would be 100 new affordable housing units. So can you explain that? Can you explain that contradiction?
Well, my understanding of this process has been that the original project was a 600-car parking garage on top of a library. And in talking to people who were very active at the time with the funds from Measure S, there was a lot of community pushback in terms of doing anything outside of where the library is now and on that lot. So Our Downtown, Our Future group has actually designated several parking sites where we can build low-income housing. People keep acting like, we've already broken ground on this project, and we haven't broken ground on this project. And so we can look at other sites for affordable housing. I'm also concerned that there's so much building happening downtown now, including market rate housing everywhere, that where will the public space be? Where will the open space be? Where will the trees be? And so
It's a parking lot. Right now it's a parking lot. So.
No, I know, but Our Downtown, Our Future would make it into like a commons, a downtown commons. And actually I've heard from those organizers that they are willing to allow for affordable housing to go into that parking lot. So we could do that as well.
So that's what you're looking at.
Yeah. Our Downtown, Our Future has a whole, a whole plan for the downtown. That's different than putting in the mixed-use library project.
Justin, your turn. You also, affordable housing, you talk about it all the time, but of course you've also voted against several affordable housing proposals, including 831 Water Street and also the Riverfront project. And those would be, again, a large number of affordable housing units. That would be, I think it was 55 to 82 at 831 Water, and then there's about 20 that were at the riverfront. So closest to like 75 to 102 affordable units that you turned down. So can you explain that? Help us understand the contradiction.
Sure. Ooh. Hello.
All right. So, as I mentioned before, I am a proponent of affordable housing, but what I'm trying to do is maximize the amount of affordable housing that goes into new market rate developments. 130 Center Street just passed, and one of the reasons why I voted for that project, which is also market rate, single room occupancy development, was that they were able to bring the affordable level up to 20% of the total number of units. That was something I'm willing to support. With the Front and River Street project, those projects received density bonuses, which actually reduced the amount of affordable housing overall in those units. What I pushed for is that using Section 8, that we would increase the amount of affordable housing within those units to bring it up to 20%. I didn't get the support of the city council on that, and I think similarly, you know, the developer said, if we want to have that conversation, the council wants to do it, the council can take action. I made a motion to increase the amount of affordable housing in those units, and it was opposed by the majority of the council. So I am fighting for affordable housing, and I do support affordable housing, and that's an example of how I was trying to maximize affordable housing, and it wasn't accepted by the city council. 831 Water Street, there was a number of different issues with that. One, it segregated the two buildings, and constantly when we were trying to make changes, because we initially voted against the project, and we kept having the applicant provide new materials, even when we were sitting in meetings. That is not a good process. We need to make sure that the process is clear, they come to us with everything that they need, the application is complete, and then we can take action on it.
Thank you. Okay, Shepard, did you have something you wanted to say? It seemed like you wanted to, but okay. All right, well, we're going to move into our lightning round for the end. There is a question that we have been having from the audience that's going to kick off our lightning round, and it's the question that's on everyone's minds, of course, Measure D, which is ripping our community apart. If you could quickly say what your stand on it is and why, but really fast. Remember, it's lightning round, so we're going really fast, as quick as you can to get this out. Okay, well, I don't know who we're starting with.
I can go.
Okay, Justin.
You got a button on, so I'll go first.
You got it.
First of all, saying we care about the environment, we need more forms of environmentally sustainable mass transit. The firefighters have signed a letter stating that it will impact our ability to fight fires in our mountains. If we remove the rail, we will never get it back. And there is some talk that if we decide to remove the rail, that there will be lawsuits filed by property owners who are adjacent to those lines, and it's actually an attempt at a money grab for people to use this as an opportunity to sue the federal government.
So no, you're a no.
So I'm absolutely no on D, and I'm actively campaigning against it.
Amy?
Yes, I'm also no on D. I think it's really exciting that we can connect to the regional trail line. If you look at the maps, it would be the only county area that has actually taken down our rail instead of connecting to Monterey and Salinas and all these other places. The firefighters have asked that we keep these tracks, and as someone who would be representing District 3, where the fire threat is huge, I mean, the whole county, the fire threat is huge. We need every firefighting capacity that we can get. I also want to mention that I'm not taking any funding from millionaire backers of Greenway. I am also not taking any PAC money funding, unlimited PAC money funding. That is an issue for me in this campaign. One of my opponents is taking that kind of funding. This is something that has taken this country to the brink of disaster under Citizens United, and I refuse to take PAC money.
This is where my opponents and I do agree. I'm also a no on D. I think it's important to preserve our right of way and keep that option open for alternate mode of transportation on our rail corridor.
Okay, good. Next one. And Amy, you're going to be first. This is, what's your favorite spot to visit in the county?
I was hoping it'd be like, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
It's not as hard as
Favorite place to visit?
What's
The
your favorite place?
Pogonip is my church.
Okay, nice answer.
Wilder Bluffs morning runs with those ladies over there.
Carter's one. Okay, Justin.
That's a tough one.
Pick one.
One of my favorite spots is it's the last hole at the disc golf course that looks out over Monterey Bay.
Okay, all right. Okay, who's next? Shebra, your go-to restaurant.
Laylee's. That's been a recent one.
Good. All right, Justin. The hardest question of the night.
The Parish, yeah.
The
sounds
Parish.
good.
Okay.
I was a waitress for many years at Gabriella Cafe, and so when I'm feeling spendy, that's where I go. That's where I grew up here. That's where I have a lot of heart connections. It's such a poetic place, and local organic foods, wonderful, very quirky, curmudgeonly owner. You may know him, Paul Crocking. He's an endorser.
Okay, I think it's Shebra or you, Justin? Who's next? Your turn. Post-pandemic, where do you most want to travel?
Spain.
Spain, okay.
I spent some time in Bilbao, Spain. Studied abroad there when I was 17, 20, and then I've been back for a number of weddings. It's a coastal community. There's a lot of surf and skate. It would be a great sister city potentially in the future, and I encourage all of you to look it up and check it out.
Good museum too, right? Great museum there.
Well, I'm trying not to fly too much. I think we forget. We're in a climate crisis. Hello, we could just go on with business as usual, or we could change. That might be better. This planet could become unlivable. I know that's not a good thing to run
Okay,
on.
so you're not going anywhere. Come on. You're
Okay, I'm sorry.
somewhere.
Yeah, I'm
You
still
don't
like,
fly, you
I'm
can
still
walk.
forming.
Where are you gonna go? You can walk.
I'm at Bali. I would go to.
Oh,
If I didn't have to
take a
worry
plane.
about the emissions, I would go to
Okay.
Bali because it looks fabulous.
I'd love to go back home to Iran and visit my family.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, okay, who is your political inspiration? I think it was on Amy or Shebra. I don't know who I'm on. Amy. Political inspiration.
Oh, this is a hard one. Well, you know I'm an activist. Probably Gandhi. I think when I watched the movie Gandhi, I was 13 years old, and I walked out of there like, well, that's it. That's what you have to be in this life. Yeah, AOC, love her. We gotta shake things up, folks. We gotta stop business as usual.
Thank you to Furuk Farrokhzad, an Iranian feminist and poet pre-revolution. And these days, Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
Recently, there was a screening up on campus during the Real Works Film Festival that I helped moderate a discussion with the director on. It was about Barbara Lee, and it was so inspiring to watch the documentary about her life and the work that she's done. She was the only dissenting vote against us giving presidential power to invade Iraq, and now has come back, and everybody's like, that was the right move. And so, yeah, she's my new inspiration.
Yep, wonderful. Yep, I had a student in one of my classes who wrote about that too, so good that that happened. All right, yes, well, it's been very inspirational to be here tonight and to hear everyone what they have to say, and I hope that it's helped clarify a little bit for some of you where people stand on issues and made the election and the balloting process a little easier. And thank you for participating, and again, for taking part in democracy. That is the ultimate goal of this, right? You're fulfilling your democratic right to vote when you participate and when you go to the ballot. So keep doing that, keep reading Lookout, and thank you again to all of our sponsors, and join us again sometime.